When I tested exotic hand cannons last season, Thorn felt insane, and now it's 20% stronger against red bar enemies and 75% stronger against orange bar enemies. In endgame content, when 15 to 20 power levels under, this is capable of one-shotting enemies even with a body shot because of how strong the tick damage has become, and oftentimes a headshot will just outright kill enemies as well. When paired with Necrotic Grips and the ability to chain poison from Thorn to nearby enemies, its ad clear also gets way better, and then picking up the Thorn wisps that it creates also allows you to deal over double the damage with each tick of poison from the gun. Compared to all other exotic hand cannons, including Sunshot, this is way stronger against orange bar enemies as well. If you have Soul Devourer active, it ends up being like 4 to 5 shots in the crit to kill most major enemy types, even when under power. The only two things that aren't great about Thorn is having 9 shots in the mag is pretty low, and there really isn't any healing that this exotic provides compared to running something like Sunshot with an infinite resto build. And both of these issues are easily fixed because collecting the wisps Thorn creates constantly ends up filling your magazine over time, and running this full build on Void means we have access to Devour, where in most cases, as the poison is constantly spreading around a room, you're getting a kill without even trying almost every second, giving you full health and full shields over and over and over. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say Thorn is busted now, and so is this build. So if you guys end up enjoying the video at all or end up running the build itself, make sure to drop a quick like and sub down below to help us hit 80k on the channel. And with that out of the way, let's start by going over everything we're running in the build. Just in case it's not abundantly clear for anybody or you're newer to the game, Thorn is the exotic primary that we're running. Anytime that you hit an enemy with this, it's going to apply a dot to them, which stands for damage over time. That's going to slowly poison them. And then anytime you get a kill with Thorn, they'll drop those little wisps. You can pick that up to refill portions of the magazine, and then also get a higher damage for that dot that you're applying. And then this is obviously going to be paired with Necrotic Grips. And with Necrotic Grips, anytime we use our melee ability, that's also going to poison enemies. And if that enemy dies to the poison, it's going to explode and spread poison to everything nearby. And this just so happens to chain with Thorn. So instead of actually needing to use our melee, we can just use Thorn. When the Thorn gets a final blow, it'll chain that poison to everything. For the build, this is the full Voidwalker setup that we're running. For our super, I tend to always default to Vortex if I'm using it for boss damage. For tankier enemies, I will switch to Cataclysm, and if you really need the ad clear, Nova Warp is pretty solid, but I tend not to use this. Healing Rift is going to be the best option, mainly just to help our team out with some healing sources, and then also when paired with Child of the Old Gods, which is one of our aspects, which I'll be going over in a bit. Pocket Singularity is obviously the only melee you have access to, and then for your grenade, I prefer scatter grenades. Some people prefer Vortex. Whichever one you choose is going to be fine. All these other nades tend to be a lot weaker though. I did choose to run Feed the Void on the build with this. Anytime we do get an ability final blow, we're going to be proccing Devour, where Devour now gives full health and full shields on every kill. It's going to also give grenade energy depending on the tier of enemy that we defeat. So tankier enemies give more grenade energy back. And then also we're extending this Devour timer. So once Devour is active, we can start getting kills with anything and keep refreshing this. Second to this, with Child of the Old Gods, whenever we place down our Rift, we're going to be casting a Void Soul, and then shooting an enemy will send the Void Soul out to its location. It'll plant itself down, and then anything connected to it within like a 10-meter radius will constantly be taking damage and will be getting weakened. When it's taking damage directly from the Void Soul, since we're on Healing Rift, that's going to be giving us grenade and melee energy back. And then on top of this, whenever we defeat an enemy that is connected to the Void Soul, whether the Void Soul gets the kill or we get the kill, that is going to give class ability energy back as well. So we can easily cycle all 3 abilities just by using our Healing Rift. Lastly, for our fragments, Echo of Undermining is going to apply Weaken anytime we use our grenade and hit an enemy. If nothing else, this just makes our grenades 15% stronger, and those weakened enemies are also, if you don't kill them, taking 15% more damage from all sources. We are still running Echo of Starvation, which seems a bit redundant. Anytime we pick up a Void Breach or an Overpower, this also grants Devour. Especially in endgame content, you might not always be able to proc Devour on just an ability kill, and there should be tons of Orbs of Power around from you and your teammates. And then on top of this, anytime you also pick up a Void Breach or an Orb of Power, even if you already have Devour going, that will also refresh Devour, giving full health and full shields. So in other situations where you might have Devour and you can't manage to get a kill, to survive and give you full health and full shields, you can easily just pick up a Void Breach or an Orb instead. Echo of Reprisal doesn't offer too much to the build. When surrounded and we defeat enemies, we're going to be getting increased super energy gains. Nothing else here really felt that good, but I would argue you could switch this out for something like Echo of Obscurity, so you can finish an enemy and get a brief amount of invis. Lastly, with Echo of Harvest, anytime we defeat a weakened enemy, we're going to create an Orb Breach and also create an Orb of Power, which is going to pair extremely well to have orbs and Void Breaches all over the place with something like Echo of Starvation, so we can always crutch this to proc Devour when we're about to die. And since we also have Child of the Old Gods and Weakened Grenades, that's two different sources that we are able to apply to constantly use Echo of Harvest to make those orbs and those Void Breaches consistently. As always, these are the mods on screen right now. You guys can pause the video, take a screenshot, apply them yourselves really quickly, or as always, there will be a dim link, so you can click that and just apply the build in-game yourself if you want that down in the description. On my helmet, first up, I have Heavy Ammo Finder. With this and an exotic primary, just like Thorn, you're going to be able to create a Heavy Ammo Finder brick and have that drop for you in-game every 17 kills you get. I have a full recent video, which I'll link below, covering this and why it's super useful. And then with Heavy Ammo Scout, this just makes it so that anytime I make a Finder brick for myself, my teammates are also seeing that Finder brick and can pick that up in-game. Typically, it's really good to run 2 heavy ammo scouts to benefit your team, but in this gameplay, I was running Kinetic Siphon just for the general mid play because I didn't need that much heavy ammo, and for this reason, I'm just generating Orbs of Power every 2 kills I get with Thorn, so I can pick that up and proc Devour much more consistently. Once again, our gauntlets are Necrotic Grips, so absolutely make sure you're running these. The first mod I have on is Firepower. Anytime we get a Grenade Final Blow, that will also create an Orb of Power. We get grenades like crazy with Devour, so that's why this is a very beneficial mod. And then even though it seems kind of weird, I didn't think other mods really help the build that much, and something like Kinetic Loader helps a ton for the few times that you actually need to reload Thorn, because hand cannons do tend to have a pretty lengthy reload time. As always, on my chest piece, I have 3 copies of damage reduction mods. This is a really good practice to get into for end game content. 1 copy will give 15%, 2 copies gives 25%, and then 3 copies ends up giving you 35%. In this case, I just have 15% for Arc, 15% for Void, and 15% for anything that is AoE. On my boots, I have Innervation, so that every time I pick up an Orb of Power, I'm gaining 10% grenade energy to keep my grenade uptime extremely high. I also have Kinetic Weapon Surge to buff Thorn and the damage over time it deals by 10%. And then lastly, Stacks on Stacks, so that picking up an Orb of Power, instead of giving me 1 armor charge, it now gives 2 armor charge stacks. Lastly, on my class item, I do have Bomber, once again, just for increased grenade uptime. In sketchier situations, if you do have a grenade, it is super useful to get a kill, especially on a very tanky enemy, to proc Devour, especially if you don't have time to like shoot 4 shots of a primary or something like that. Elemental Time Dilation is great to keep my Kinetic Surge uptime very high, to keep Thorn buffed by 10%. This takes it from 10 seconds per armor charge stacks up to 15 seconds. So those will wear off a lot slower now. And then lastly, with Powerful Attraction, anytime I place my Rift down, I'm collecting all Orbs of Power in a specific radius, and then getting all the benefits of things like armor charge stacks, and then even things like Innervation. The last thing I will note is that depending on the piece of content, if Thorn feels perfectly strong as is, I would definitely recommend swapping off of Kinetic Surges and then putting on, instead of Elemental Time Dilation, because you won't really need that, putting on something like Special Finisher so that you can benefit your team by spawning in special ammo. It really just depends on the piece of content that you're in. Sometimes Thorn will kill in a very weird fashion, as you're going to see. I'll put some gameplay up, but when you're using Necrotic Grips and Thorn, if you end up like almost one-shotting and then 1 tick of damage goes off and it doesn't register that necrotics are applying or some weird reason, it's not going to send that AoE out, and it makes the Thorn necrotic combo much worse. It almost makes it so that it doesn't even work. So in those cases, it's better to ramp up your damage slightly and then just insta-kill the enemy with a single crit shot or a body shot or something like that, so that necrotics are constantly proccing. I think it's a very weird bug. I'm pretty sure it only happens if an enemy takes 1 shot of damage and then 1 tick of damage, and it doesn't have time to register that they died to the poison or the dot or something like that. It's a very weird bug, but that's the main reason that Kinetic Surge kind of comes in clutch with this build, to change around the damage that you're dealing. That is it for the build and the video. Try this out and let me know how you think it holds up, especially compared to Sunshot in harder content. And I do also stream a bunch over on my Twitch. If you guys ever want to come hang out and play Destiny over there, a link is in my description below. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.